Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. My name is Brandon, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. The mission of Free State Colorado is to promote a culture of liberty, freedom of the individual, and a free market. Today, I'm joined by one of Colorado's premier liberty leaders, Natalie Menten. Natalie's political experience includes spending 8 years on the RTD board, spearheading the repeal of the grocery tax in Lakewood, and is one of the state's strongest defenders of Tabor, serving on the board of the Tabor Foundation and Tabor Committee. Natalie is an expert at deciphering ballot language, and today she's going to share information on some of this year's ballot initiatives. Well, Natalie, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, Natalie, let's start with Jefferson County. What can you get? Can you give us some insight about the ballot initiatives in Jefferson County this year?
Sure. To start with, I'm Natalie Menten, and longtime involvement with ballot issues, especially protecting our taxpayers' Bill of Rights, which just want to let everybody know it's going to be the 30th anniversary of Tabor. It was approved 30 years ago, 1992, and so it's been serving Colorado for a very long time. Most people that have been here a while are aware that there have been attacks on Tabor for a long time, year after year after year, whether it's local level or state level, because Tabor covers both of all the levels of government in Colorado. And it's good to know there's a lot of different governments. People think about the state, but then we have local issues like county issues. And we can go into a little more depth on that because we've got that going on in Jeffco. But I do want to start at the beginning that I've done an enormous amount of research on local issues this year. And even if somebody's watching and they don't live in Jeffco, then go visit a website I put together called ballot2022.com. And at ballot2022.com, there is a downloadable PDF that lists let's put it this way, a lot of research on local governments, and it boils down the local ballot issues, and it's sorted by counties. So somebody can go to that website, go to the PDF, it's a viewable one, or download it, go down to the county that you live in, and you could potentially see a very similar issue to what I'm going to talk about more in depth here that we have going on in Jeffco. And it has to really boil down to about property taxes. And somebody says, well, I don't own property. Well, actually, the reality is, because of government, who really does own property? Because you pay property taxes. And if you're a landlord or own a rental property, you end up paying property taxes, and those are a cost involved with that business action of renting out property. So what you end up doing is passing it on down to the renter. So that's why it applies to every person who's watching this video. So in Jefferson County, we've got 3 issues going on. And as a history here, we had an election in 2019 where we beat this tax increase back by a good sizable number. And the voters spoke at that time, but it didn't stop the county there. So they've been working since 2019 to put something on the ballot again, and they have come forward with these issues. There are 3 of them in Jefferson County. The first is issue 1A. And at the county level, how the ballot question is framed is really put together by staff and lawyers, and is approved by the county commissioners. That's a little bit of a different process than how statewide questions may be framed. And that means that your elected officials can use liberty, meaning in a bad way, to frame the question in a way that suits them best, but is not exactly the most accurate thing. So here's a good way that I reflected it, and I'm not sure how this is going to show up. I don't know how that'll see. Warning, and this is a trifold flyer that we created that basically it says, warning, your 2022 ballot includes misleading ballot questions that will eliminate your Tabor refunds forever. That's the cover of it because that's what sums it up. In the Jeffco case, which can be found again in counties through the state, because those elected officials might create their own questions. Some of them may do better job than others, but in Jeffco, they were used to have a very misleading start in what the discussion should be about. Jefferson County ballot, she says that provided no local tax rate or mill levy shall be increased without voter approval, shall Jefferson County be able to exclude certain funds from certain funds, revenues, meaning tax dollars, from the revenues that are covered under the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights government revenue limit. Now, what does that all mean? It comes down to this. They're talking about taxpayers are going to get refunds from Tabor. It's one of the beautiful things about the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. And the government's saying, can we exclude certain revenues from that cap? So here's the amount of money the government's taking in. And Tabor says government can grow by a reasonable amount, meaning government can collect revenues by a reasonable amount. But when they over collect, that money gets refunded to the taxpayers. Sometimes that's an obvious, and I'm going to use it interchangeably, but try to stick with rebate because it's more accurately a rebate, the Tabor rebate. And that would be because a refund, you get all of it back. A rebate, you're just getting a portion of it back. So with this rebate that we get, sometimes it's very obvious. Like many people think of the $750 check that we got back from the state of Colorado. But also there's other mechanisms that are going on that sometimes are not so obvious about how we're benefiting from the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. Those are, moving on up from that check that came in the mail, is there's also a temporary income tax rate reduction. There's the homestead and senior the senior homestead and disabled veteran property tax exemption is also funded under Tabor rebates. But going back to the county level, the way it works there is that because the big identifiable part of the revenue coming in is attributable to property taxes. So the efficient way when you have a Tabor rebate in a county is to do a direct rebate on the property taxes. It's a green way to do it if you want to think of it that way. You don't have to send out checks. It's going to apply to the person who's paid the property taxes. Well, what Jefferson County is, first of all, going back to asking is, can we exclude a part of the revenue that counts and would go towards that general fund, let's call it, take that out, and therefore the amount that's going to apply and be capped by Tabor is reduced by whatever that amount is. Now, they've made it sound like they're removing a small part from that cap. But what is the fact is that it's stating it'll be everything except non-property tax revenues. So what does that mean? And they use examples such as state grants. Well, they did that purposely because they don't want to talk about all the other taxes they get, from gaming taxes to think about your car registration and that long list that's on the back. You want to talk about tobacco taxes. There are investments. There's a long list of revenues that they are excluding from that cap. And the reality is, just to sum that down real quickly, is they want to exclude over 60% of the taxes that they collect at the county level from Tabor. It means it's taking it out over here. What that means then is that as they put it, the property tax is still the part under Tabor. But now property taxes can grow and grow and grow and grow to get to that cap because all of that 60% plus has been taken out. But they like to frame it that it's just state grants. Of course, they use an example of wildfire state grant or The most, let's say I'm trying to think of the most, they don't have a lot of examples actually. And when I've asked them repeatedly, give me the numbers on this, the answer is they don't know. So what does this all mean? It means that because all of that big chunk of revenue's now been taken out, the property taxes can grow. And Tabor really is, when would we ever get a rebate back from Jefferson County in the future? I think it'll be a long time. The other part that is I'm going to bring up, and this gets into the weeds a little bit, and especially applies across the state for people who have those local issues like this, is that when you read the ballot language, it talks about notwithstanding the limitations of Article X, Section 20. Well, first of all, what is that? That's a taxpayer's bill of rights. It's been the voters, citizens, hundreds of citizens circulated petition signatures. The voters approved Tabor through that process, put on the ballot that was approved 30 years ago. That's removing that section. That's what Article X, Section 20 of the Colorado Constitution is. But what you should note also is then it will almost always say on your ballot or any other law. So what is that? Are you going to go dig through all the statutes to figure out that? No, because we're going to find out right here. What that is a law that was put in place and applied in 1989, so before Tabor. And what this law is called is the 5.5% property tax revenue limit. And if you want to look it up in CRS, it's 29-1-301. If I was looking over here, it's because I'm referencing the computer screen. But what a question like we've got in Jeffco is saying is, not only are we essentially removing the Tabor limits off this big chunk of money, and we're talking, I did a rough estimate because the county commissioners, at least Tracy Kraft Tharp, would not answer me. Staff won't answer me. I did that through a Quora. I said, what's the dollar amount? So I did a rough number off they call it the CAFR. It's a comprehensive annual financial report. It's the report of all the spending. And I think we're talking to the tune of $50 million that is going to be removed from Tabor because of this ballot issue. And the ballot issue is 1A. By the way, I think I may have said it early on, but I'll say it again. So this is Jefferson County ballot issue 1A. Now, I'm going to go back to being able to, and I'm just, sorry, getting to my desktop other one here, but again, going to ballot2022.com. If people go there and they look up, so again, ballot2022.com, Tabor notice and local list, they'll find I forget what it was, pretty compact spreadsheet still at 11 pages of all the local elections around Colorado. And I'm going to say a fair chunk of them are pretty much the story I just described, where people are trying to be told it might be a minor amount of money, we're going to de-Tabor, do this, or maybe de-Tabor the whole thing. But the reality is you're giving away your rebates forever, and Tabor never meant to do that. There's supposed to be a 4-year limit, so the voters can review it later, and these are permanent actions. So I'm going to hold for 1 minute there and see if you've got any questions about that.
Wow. Yeah, very frightening. This idea that it's not new. It's been going on a long time, like you said, where they know they can't repeal Tabor at the state level, but all the different counties, municipalities are trying to chip away at it to de-Tabor their local communities so they can keep more of our tax money. But I think it's really important for people to realize that it's their tax refund. It means your tax refund is going to go away, and it's less money you have for your family, less money you have to pay your bills, and it's truly frightening. So you said it's about 11 pages on the website of how many different cities and municipalities are doing this or counties, I guess at the county level, this election cycle.
Well, what I focused on in the spreadsheet was the elections that were pertaining to the taxpayers' bill of rights. So I'll give a little background on what that took. First, I had to do in the August of this year timeframe a CORA, public information request, on the 64 counties. And there's a reason for this. So I would ask the county to tell me which political subdivisions had given notice they were reserving a place on the ballot. That's the way to get a, it's consider them, the county election department is like the warehouse. And all these local governments, and I believe we're over 4,000 local governments in Colorado now. All of these local governments would, per Colorado revised statutes, have a deadline to reserve their spot by letting the election department know, hey, we're thinking of running a ballot issue. And hopefully they tell the county, hey, it's going to be or not related to the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights or TABOR. So that's the point where I want to catch them after the deadline's passed, do the court to the county, say, give me the list of every local political subdivision that has reserved the spot, reserved the room. Following that, there's a deadline where they set and give them the actual language. Well, there was a reason to put this all together, and it was because wanted to get the word out to people. And again, I'm not sure who shows up, but this is the local ballot issue book. So a lot of voters will get a book similar to this. It might be only one sheet folded, but there are pro-con statements in these. And you have to know about the deadline to be able to fight the, in my case, tax hikes and share the word. So if people miss that deadline, then it says no submission or no statement submitted by the deadline. And so that was the whole purpose in doing this. So it meant doing the core with all these counties. Finally, they would give me the list back. Some were good and some were horrible. I give real credit to the ones that were good. Same day. I mean, they already had this stuff. It was on their desk. It was election time. It's not like they had to go in the back file cabinet somewhere. Some bought me on it. It was somewhat miserable. But then have to go to then digging into all those local governments. And some of them don't even post minutes. I mean, I'm gonna point to Highland Hills up north. It's the Park and Rec where Waterworld is. You can't even find minutes of the board meetings. So somewhere again, good. You'd find great sets of minutes. There's program where they can post these things. Anyway, the point is, I had to search up all these local ballot issues because I had to put them in the spreadsheet. So that was over 200 local governments. And then find people, hopefully, or at least get the word out that, hey, you've got a deadline to submit a con statement to fight a tax hike. Here's the process, how to do it. Here's hints, tips, da-da-da. And so that was the first result or purpose for that website. And now it serves to help just boil it down so people don't get tricked into this deceptive language and wording. Things like, we won't increase the tax rate on your property like this Jeffco 1A. Well, we won't increase the rate or we won't increase the mill levy, but what they're not telling you is, and this is the important part of this rambling perhaps, the important part to remember is when you have removed that TABOR limit and the 5.5% property tax cap, sure, the rate may not go up and the mill levy rate may not go up, but is the assessment of your property going to go up? It's very likely it is, right? So now the growth of that property value goes up. And if you've removed all that limit, doesn't matter that you didn't increase the rate or the mill levy itself. You've removed that cap that was safeguarded you for many years. In Jeffco's case with 1A, they actually want to try to tell you that only 2 counties in Colorado have the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights protections. That's not the case. We are one of 13 counties. Now, that's a pretty sad number considering we have 64 counties in Colorado. We are one of 13 in Jeffco that still has all or a majority of our taxpayers or a portion of our Taxpayers' Bill of Rights still in place. After TABOR passed and the local governments figured out they had better paid lawyers to craft things. And I think most citizens can recognize it's quite a challenge to do a legal, a lawsuit against a government that they could get away with a lot of things. In those early years after Tabor passed, a majority of the counties have slid by the voters, probably deceptively, or with language that was less than clear. Let's put it kindly, language that was very less than clear what they were having taxpayers do long ago. And this goes into a thing I want to do a video with you about later on, about how do you regain, or we could do it now maybe, how do you regain your Tabor at a county level? Well, most citizens don't know this, but you can't petition your government at a county level. You can't say, I'm going to go out and I want to put something on the ballot, and it will affect the county, like regaining the rights of taxpayers. You don't have that at the county level. So when you give away those rights, you're totally dependent now upon the elected officials. So the point I'll be, don't vote yes on 1A. You're making a permanent decision that, as I described, affects you as a renter or a property owner, whichever it may be. You're permanently removing over 60% of the revenues from the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, government revenue caps. You're giving up your refunds. That is a tax increase. If you're paying more in those property taxes, or you don't get the rebate check like Jeffco's been sending to people in a political ploy, really. They want to try to make people look like it's a pain in the rear to send these checks. They don't have to do that. They made a conscious decision to send these checks to people. They could have just done paperless right on the property taxes. For a variety of reasons, this is all the reasons, and so many more, to vote no on Jeffco 1A.
Wow. Yes, thank you for that explanation. It's fascinating, and really I appreciate the in-depth research that you've done and all the work you put into that. I know it's not easy, and thank you very much for everything you've done.
Well, hopefully, did I try to break it? I tried to break it down to, you know, but it's an intense issue. So,
Mhm.
I hope people will understand how it impacts them, even though it's worded in a really deceptive way.
Right, right. And that's a problem, I think, with a lot of our government in general and the ballot specifically. It's not always easy to tell exactly what the initiatives are going to do, especially when it's the county or state lawyers writing them and using a lot of jargon and legal jargon, political jargon that most people are not too familiar with.
Yeah.
So, so Natalie, is it fair to say then, just to clarify for people, the county commissioners in Jefferson County are pretty much are the ones responsible for getting 1A on the ballot?
Yes. That was their decision, and I'll share our chair of our county commissioners, actually, Commissioner Andy Kerr, is no fan of the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. There's been a over a decade long, right around there, legal challenge to overturn Tabor at the statewide level, and our county commissioner, in his personal role, is the lead plaintiff in that legal challenge to overturn Tabor entirely at the state level. So to see him as wanting to drive this back onto the ballot, even though we said no in 2019, not much has changed. Matter of fact, there's been shenanigans. They say they haven't got the revenue, but they got close to $200 million in federal bailout money, which they're now just starting to spend. It was their decision, yes, put it on the ballot. It was their decision to word the question the way it is, which is deceptive and sly. It was the county commissioner's decision to issue property or Tabor rebate checks last year in the amount of a few dollars to each and every taxpayer, and use taxpayer funding to spend close to, I think this round, they were close to $250,000 on the postage and stamps to mail out checks. So they've done this 2 years in a row. So last year's check was fairly small. This year's check is about 35, 40 bucks. It's proportional, well, for the average homeowner, probably proportional amount. They didn't have to spend that money on sending the checks to us. They could have again applied it on the property taxes. The only people who did get it were property tax payers. Again, that's the most identifiable portion of how you issue it in a convenient way. But they could choose other methods too. Tabor doesn't define how you issue rebates. They could have a tax holiday. They could give everybody, instead of charging us all one of those line items, the back of their car registration fee, they could knock that line out for 1 year, whatever amount of time. They have all of these choices. They're entirely responsible for the issue. And I am sad to say that I think even if we knock down this issue, they won't be done yet. I look at a couple of issues, the other issues they've got in the ballot that I want to talk about, issue 1B and 1C. So yeah, it's all on their shoulders.
It's, yeah, like you said, it's not only important to defeat 1A this year, but also to make sure the voters are holding these commissioners accountable for trying to steal their tax refund money away from them. I think
Yes.
that's a very powerful message, and I think it could be a good message going forward for people who want to challenge them in future elections.
Yeah.